Hello, this is Scott Carpenter, and welcome to another edition of the Sasquatch Awareness Project. And tonight, I wanted to talk about a special warning to parents concerning their children. And I have devoted a whole chapter in my book to this because I think it's very important. Because sometimes we discount what children see, and a lot of parents, if the child comes to the parent, that's just a figment of your imagination, or you just have an overactive imagination. I know when I was a child things would scare me, etc. But I think especially nowadays we have to be extremely careful and listen to our children and take what they're telling us seriously. Most children are just not going to make up frivolous stories, and if something scares them, and your child, if you know they're really generally scared, then pay attention to what they're telling you, because unfortunately in this world, these supernatural events, Sasquatch, other cryptids, these things manifest in front of our children, and they'll manifest in front of our children long before they do the adults or the parents, or that's all they'll ever manifest to. And some children have the ability to see, kind of like past the veil into the other realm, and can see things that would probably terrify us, and you've got to terrify them. But I noticed a disturbing trend in parents. It took parents a while to kind of clue in on this, and me too. But in the world of Sasquatch research, a lot of kids who see a Sasquatch don't have a reference point, and so what they'll do is they'll tell their parents, and relate it to something they know, and something tangible they know, and usually that's a bear. And so it's very, very common for a child to tell a parent, I saw a bear in the woods staring at me, or I saw a bear, walking through the woods, and the parent will say, well, was it, walking? Well, yeah, it was upright. It was walking on two legs. In other words, the mannerisms and how the bear appears is bipedal and like a person, but they'll describe it like, they'll say it was a bear. So if you're, a parent in any rural situation or a camping or any outdoor activity, and your child tells you they saw a bear, and they saw a bear that talked to them, or they saw a bear that was walking, or they saw a bear that was hiding and peeking out from behind a tree and going back in, take that seriously. And in my humble opinion, you just ought to say bear equals Sasquatch when it comes to children. And you need to take that seriously, those reports very seriously, because in all our research and the reports that we get, the Sasquatch, most of the daylight full body sightings of a Sasquatch, when they allow themselves to be seen, is to women and children. That's a fact. And so you have to be aware of that. And a group of children are playing and they talk about seeing a bear, you need to take that seriously. You need to pull them back. May need to even pull up camp and go somewhere else. Of course, if it's in your, if it's around your home, then I've talked before about the trail cameras, fences, and the motion sensor lights, and if possible, a privacy fence 10 to 12 foot tall to kind of discourage the Sasquatch from approaching and looking and watching. They have a tendency to watch. They're watchers. They like to observe and can just watch people for. People have said, for 45 minutes to an hour or longer. Will be watching them, just watching, just like they're entertainment or watching TV. And so, and I can't say 100% what the Sasquatch will do. It may not do anything but just watch and then go away. But I don't know that. I can't guarantee that. And so that's why I think we need to take our children very seriously in situations where in the rural areas, camping and in the outdoors, fishing, if you're in national parks and stuff, if your child claims to see a bear, of course there's the four-legged normal bear, but if your child claims to see a bear and it's odd, like the bear was peeking at me, the bear was talking to me, the bear was walking between the trees and peeking at me, you need to take that very seriously and act accordingly to keep your children safe. I think it's very important, and it's something that it's just like I said when I was growing up, my mom would have just wrote it off, but I don't think today we need to do that. Now, I also want to talk about some facts and some things that women need to know. And to be honest with you, if you have children in the room, if you have someone that's underage or not mature, I would recommend you remove them from the room, because I'm going to talk about an adult subject here. And so I don't want any children exposed, younger children exposed to some things they don't need to hear. So, if you got younger children, and if they're watching this, mixed company, and you feel uncomfortable, please, have them the children leave the room, or go get them doing something else, or pause the video and then go back to it when you can watch it by yourself. Now, when I've had people report things to me, women, and particularly about the Sasquatch, and this is what was reported, and both of these people I believe 100%, and this is people I've interacted with directly on the telephone and via messenger and via email, and I know of many others, not just these, but these were, I can recount these because I'm the guy they reported to. Now, the Sasquatch know and sense when a woman's on her menstrual cycle, and most, in our experience working with David Pilates and what he found through his statistical breakdown of sightings, most of the time when a woman has a full body daylight sighting of a Sasquatch, she's also on her menstrual cycle, a very high percentage. And just a warning to women, you have to be very careful when you're on your menstrual cycle and you go out into the woods or camping or hiking or whatever, because the Sasquatch are keenly aware of this. Now, I had one woman, two real quick, these can be long stories, but short story is I had a lady email me first and say, I moved on to some property, we got 40 acres, it was up north, like Ohio, Michigan area, kind of keep it vague, and to protect her, because, I have permission to share the story, I don't have permission to share the detail, like who she is, where she lives. And so she asked, some questions. She said that they moved onto this property. It was in the springtime. There's like, it is a situation where they had about 40 acres, and they had a house and a little bit of woods, and then a majority of this was in farm fields. So they had a situation where the back, they had a back porch, covered back porch that went down into a backyard, and then it went into a field. And then across the field was, a couple 300 yards, were the woods. And the lady told me that, in an email related to me, that she looked out, she was doing the dishes, she looked out the kitchen window on the porch, her mom was waving at somebody in the woods, and she went out and said, "Mom, what are you doing?" She said, "Well, there's a big hairy man kind of stepped out of the woods over there, and he was watching me and I was watching him, so I decided to wave and he waved back." And she contacted me, and I just told her to be careful, be very, careful. I said, "Is there a man in the house?" She said no, she was divorced. It was her mom, and her son. And her son was like 8 or 9 years old. And so I just said, just be careful. You don't, you don't know what you're dealing with. You don't know how many there are. I kind of gave her my full warning. So, and I gave her my phone number and said, if you ever have any issues, need to talk, call me. Thinking that she'd probably never call me. I'd probably never hear from her again, which would be good, be fine. Well, that, I would say, this was like early spring, like this time of year, like maybe March, April, probably March or April. So I get a phone call from her. I almost didn't answer it, but I saw where the state was from, and I thought, I knew I had talked to some people in this state about the Sasquatch, so I went ahead and answered it. And it was this lady. And this was probably in I think it was late August, before harvest. And so she was in a pure panic. She was hysterical, she was crying, she was very upset. And I calmed her down and said, well, what's going on? She said, well, I should have listened to you earlier. You warned me about being careful around these things. And she said, I went ahead and I had a local farmer come up to me and ask me if he could lease the land to grow corn on, and I told him he could. She said it would make a little extra money. And, I think it was a family member that actually did it, so, it was a deal made. But anyway, he planted corn. And so, get this picture, you have a backyard, come off the porch backyard, and you go a normal backyard, 30, 40, 30 feet, 60 feet, and then you start the cornfield. And she said, starting as the corn got kind of up and got grown, she said they started noticing that the Sasquatch, she would she'd notice them at night or notice them late in the evening, and she'd be doing her dishes and she'd look out and she'd either see one peering out of the corn at her, or after dark she'd see their eyes glowing. She said sometimes they were red eyes and sometimes they were white. And they just thought that was the greatest thing in the world. That was very exciting. My fire popped. And so didn't think nothing of it. She didn't discourage it. She didn't feed them, but she just kind of she got excited and would go out and look at them, and they'd look at her, that sort of deal. Well, fast forward to late August, early September, and she said that she was doing the dishes in the evening. It wasn't dark yet, and they have on the they got a back porch. It's a covered back porch, and then steps, 3 or 4 steps going down, and then she all along the back porch she has wind chimes. So she started hearing the wind chimes, like she's facing out. She said it was on her left, so it was and she heard the wind chimes just going constantly. So she stepped outside. She saw movement and looked around, and she said there was a large gray Sasquatch. Said at least above the eave. I mean, she said you could barely see his. The eave of the house is about 10 foot. His head was above that, and said he had the little thing in his hand, the little clanker thing. I can't think of what it's called. And he was getting her attention. He was sitting there just, like a ringing a bell was ringing that. So when she stepped out and looked over there, he stopped. He never looked at her. He was there, and she said he was looking towards the front of the house, down the side of the house, and never looked at her. And this was, and she said then movement to her right caught her eye. And she turned, and about an 8 foot, she said 7 to 8 foot black Sasquatch, she's obviously younger, came around the corner of the house and was walking just a few feet from the back of the porch. So, 7 to 10 feet away from her. She was standing, she said you went down the steps and a couple steps in there. And when he came around, she said it was more than painfully obvious that he had a full erection. And that he didn't look at her, but it was just like a parade. He was slowly walking. He walked right across in front of her in this condition. He went around the big one, and then when he went around the big one towards the front of the house, the big one, then he stepped forward and they both disappeared behind the side of the house. And of course, this just tore all to pieces. Bless her heart. And she was just, didn't know what to do. She was just really taken aback. She felt like, violated, and she also felt like, they were advertising. He was advertising to me that he was available. And so, I told her, let's get some motion sensor lights up, and she said she could do that. I said, put the trail cameras out. And I said, how soon will they be cutting the corn? And she said, well, I'll make sure that he comes and cuts it back some, because it literally came to the back of the house. So, they didn't have far to go once they came through the corn. And so, and I said, just, be very careful, and talked about the spiritual solutions. And I said, if you need anything, call me. And I've never heard back from her, so I'm hoping, and surmising that doing all those things took care of that problem. And then I have one more. There's a lady in Texas contacted me, a young lady, in her early 20s, got into, looking for Bigfoot, and she'd seen a couple. And she had contacted me for some advice. Of course, she was telling me she liked to go out alone. Of course, I was like, don't go out alone, please, for goodness sakes, don't go out alone. And anyway, long story short, is she went out alone. She lived in the Southwest, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, that area. Again, I'll be vague. And she middle of the day, she'd gone out. She was young, married, but didn't have any children. So her job, she had a day off, so she went out by herself, and she was going through this state park, wooded area, a few hundred acres. And as she's walking the trail, she's going along a trail where there are two creeks on both sides that come together in front of her. So it's humped and then goes off down into the creek bed. So she's on top. She catches movement to her left, and coming up out of the creek bed is a Sasquatch. And again, she's 50 yards from her, and it's obvious he's in a excited manner. And of course it scares her, and so she turns around and hurriedly starts walking back towards the parking lot in her car. So that one comes up and gets on my right side and is kind of keeping pace with me about 7,500 yards. She can catches glimpses of him through the foliage. And then she starts hearing something on the other side, and she looks over, and about the same distance from her on her left side. So she's got one on her right and now one on her left. And they're like paralleling her. And bless her heart, she, scared to death. She got out to the car and got away. And at first, she said, I asked her, I said, is this the first time this has happened? And, she said, well, I kind of wasn't really truthful with you. She said, because it's kind of embarrassing, and, I don't know who you are, but she said, now that this has happened, I guess I should tell you what happened to me and my husband. And so in this same park, a few months before this, her and her husband went hiking, and they're trying to have children, and they got back in a place and got where they were alone, and one thing led to another, and they did their thing, and so they're done. And since this was a thing that was spontaneous, they just kind of had to put the clothes back on and come on. And so as they're walking out, they began to hear bipedal footsteps behind them. And at first it was, far enough, they kept looking around. She was in front of her husband, and they kept looking around, and he's like, I know something's falling, so I can hear it. And then as they got closer, apparently, the way she described it, there's woods, and then there's an open field that you have to go across, and then the parking lot, and where this was. And so the field is about 100 yards across, and the grass was about knee high, maybe a little higher. And so you come out, and you come out of the woods, and the trail goes straight across that. So while they're still in the woods but approaching this field, her husband sees it, and it's I think it's either the gray, I think it was white. It was a white Sasquatch, and it was a big one. Now, she said 10, 12 foot tall, and it was following them, and it caught up to him. And I get it's almost like it knew they were getting close, so it caught up, and they could see it. And they're walking very fast. And the husband's like, "Oh, go, let's go." They knew, but they kind of knew not to just take off running, but they were walking very fast. And she said that so they break into the open, and they're going across the field. She said this thing stops at the edge of the field, and she said it throws its head back, starts doing the sniffing thing. She said it was testing the air. She said it was smelling us. It knew what had happened, and it was smelling us, she said. And then and she said, and when it started doing that, my husband just turned around, looked at me, and said, "Just run." And so they didn't even look back again. They ran to the car and got in and started the car and looked across the field, and it was gone. And so I tell you that, for the ladies out there, as as Steve Ishtal says, do with it what you will. I'm giving you information, and this is not there have been multiple occasions of this. So just as a warning, think about these things, prepare, and understand that you're at a higher risk than a man. You just are. And children are a higher risk. Most of the sightings are women and children. That's full-body daylight sightings. They show themselves to women and children. So be aware of that and understand that. And then also be aware of, their propensity to be attracted to women and to do these things. And just be aware, be armed, always go with someone else. Depending on, what's going on, with your monthly cycle and everything, be aware of that. And also be, and make sure, you take somebody with you. If that's sexist, then I'm sexist. But I think, it is what it is. It's not sexist or politically incorrect. It's just what it is. It's what they do, and that's the truth, and that's the information you need to have. And, and I would be remiss, and I would be at fault if I didn't share it, because it's important. And I don't want anybody, if I have some information that could help someone, that could save someone from the trauma and, the PTSD and all that would go along with the sighting, especially that kind of sighting, then, I feel obligated to say it and to make sure you know it. So with that bright note and disclaimer, I think I'll close out. But just be aware, be aware of the talking bears and the bears peeking out from behind the trees, and just be aware, of situations. Be situationally aware and understand that the Sasquatch, has a propensity, for women and children as far as exposure to show themselves or to have an encounter. They're more comfortable around that. They seem, for some, not all, but for some reason, it's the way they are. A man is a whole lot less likely. And of course, the more people you go with, and I always say this. Everybody says, "Well, I want to see a Sasquatch," and I'm like, "Go alone, but don't go alone," because with every set of eyes, you double the set of eyes. So if you go with someone it's two sets of eyes, you go with that's three sets of eyes, and there's more that 4 or 5 people will notice than one or two. And so always, please, go with someone. And if you don't go with someone, have the GPS locator. Let people know where you're going. Go armed if you can. All these things. Even if everybody's like, "Well, a gun won't stop a Sasquatch." No, maybe not, but they know. They know you're armed, and they just have that sense. And many people have talked about that. They sense that you're armed, and they tend to stay back and not mess with you. But the best defense is to go with at least one other person. The more the better. And so with that being said, I hope everybody has a good week. Be careful out there. Until next time, God bless, and I'll see you later.